I never thought I'd wake up to an empty driveway and a knot in my stomach, but that's exactly what happened the morning my Tesla disappeared. No broken glass. No tire marks. Just a clean, mocking patch of concrete where my car should have been. For a split second, I wondered if I'd parked somewhere else the night before. Then I saw the neon orange paper taped to my mailbox, flapping like it was proud of itself. Vehicle towed, HOA violation. That's when my heart rate jumped. I already knew who this was. Every neighborhood has one. Ours just happened to wear power like a weapon. I moved into this place because it was quiet. Small development, tucked away from the main road, trees older than most of the houses, and neighbors who mostly minded their own business. I worked hard to buy this home, and I chose it carefully. One of the biggest selling points? My property sat on the edge of the development, technically outside the HOA boundary. Different parcel map, different deed, different rules. The realtor made that very clear, and so did the paperwork I signed. I wasn't anti-HOA by principle. I just liked knowing no one could tell me what color my mailbox had to be. For the first few months, everything was fine. I'd wave at people on evening walks, charge my Tesla in the driveway, and enjoy the silence. Then she noticed me. The HOA president. Mid-50s, clipboard always in hand, haircut sharp enough to cut glass. The kind of person who didn't ask questions, she issued statements. The first time she stopped me, it sounded almost friendly. She mentioned community standards and asked if I'd reviewed the bylaws regarding vehicles. I smiled, told her I wasn't part of the HOA, and assumed that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few weeks, I caught her staring at my driveway more than once. Once, she actually took photos. Another time, she left a printed notice under my windshield wiper while I was unloading groceries. Electric vehicles not permitted to be parked overnight. I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. I emailed her politely, attached a copy of my deed, and explained, again, that her bylaws didn't apply to me. Her reply was short, cold, and confident. You are within the community. Compliance is mandatory. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules. It was about control. The night before my Tesla was towed, I'd plugged it in like always. Nothing unusual. No warning on my door. No call. Just silence. So when I stood there the next morning, staring at that empty driveway, it hit me hard. She hadn't asked. She hadn't checked. She'd gone straight to punishment. I called the towing company number on the notice, and the guy on the other end sounded bored. Yeah, they had my car. Yes, it was authorized by the HOA. No, he didn't know anything about property lines or bylaws. Pay the fee, or it stays. As I hung up, anger mixed with something colder. Because while she thought she'd finally put me in my place, I knew something she didn't. I hadn't broken a rule. I hadn't violated a bylaw. And the paperwork sitting in my desk drawer proved it. Still, standing there with no car and a fake violation notice in my hand, I understood something very clearly. This was only the beginning. The towing office smelled like stale coffee and burned rubber, the kind of place designed to make you feel small the moment you walk in. My Tesla sat behind a chain-link fence, perfectly fine, perfectly powerless. I paid the fee under protest, signed nothing extra, and drove home simmering. By the time I pulled back into my driveway, the HOA president was already there, arms crossed, lips pressed tight like she'd been rehearsing this moment. She didn't ask if I'd gotten my car back. She told me I was now on notice. According to her, electric vehicles violated community bylaws because they were commercial equipment. I blinked, genuinely confused, and asked her to show me the rule. She waved a stapled packet like it was holy scripture and said I should have read it before moving in. I reminded her, calmly, that I wasn't part of the HOA. She smirked and said the board disagreed. That word stuck with me. Disagreed. As if ownership was a matter of opinion. Over the next few days, the pressure ramped up fast. I started finding notices taped to my door instead of the mailbox. One warned of escalating fines. Another threatened legal action. A third claimed I was creating safety hazards by charging my car at home. Each one referenced HOA bylaws, bolded and highlighted, like that somehow made them binding. I responded to every notice the same way. Polite email, clear explanation, copy of my deed attached. Every reply I got back was shorter than the last. Neighbors started to notice too. A couple stopped me during evening walks, awkward smiles on their faces, asking what was going on with the Tesla situation. Someone else warned me the HOA president had been talking about me at meetings, calling me non-compliant and hostile. That one almost made me laugh. Hostile? I hadn't raised my voice once, but I could feel the shift. I wasn't just a neighbor anymore. I was a problem to be solved. Then came the meeting notice. Mandatory attendance, according to the letter slid under my door at 6 a.m. Failure to appear would result in further enforcement actions. I didn't have to go. I knew that. But I also knew this wasn't going to stop unless I confronted it head-on. So I showed up. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights, a long table where the board sat like judges, the HOA president right in the middle. She wasted no time. She accused me of ignoring community standards, endangering property values, and refusing to cooperate. She talked fast, confident, like momentum itself was on her side. When it was my turn, I explained again that I wasn't subject to their rules. I offered to show the parcel map. She cut me off and said the board had already decided. That was the moment I realized logic wasn't welcome in that room. By the end of the meeting, they announced a daily fine until I complied. No Tesla in the driveway. No charging on the property. I walked out with every eye on me. Some sympathetic, some annoyed, all of them unsure. Outside, I sat in my car for a long minute, hands on the wheel, breathing slow. They thought they'd backed me into a corner. What they didn't know was that I'd already started preparing for the next move. That night, I laid every document across my kitchen table, mapping boundaries, dates, and signatures, not angry, not rushed, just methodical. Because when someone mistakes confidence for authority, the smartest response isn't louder words. It's patience, preparation, and letting them keep talking. While they smiled, confidently. By the time the third week rolled around, the pressure from the HOA had turned into a full-blown campaign. Notices appeared on my doorstep almost daily, each one more aggressive than the last. Failure to comply will result in legal action, one warned, with a jagged red stamp screaming, "Final notice." Another claimed my Tesla endangered community safety and aesthetics, as if a silent, stationary electric car could spark riots. I started keeping a binder with every letter, every email, every single correspondence neatly dated, because I knew somewhere deep down this wasn't going to be about logic. This was going to be a war of intimidation. The HOA president escalated next. She showed up on my property unannounced, clipboard in hand, measuring my driveway as if she had the right. I stood on my porch, calm but alert, while she muttered about bylaws and community oversight. I asked her politely to leave, reminding her again that I wasn't part of the HOA. She stared at me like I had just insulted her entire existence and muttered something about legal loopholes. That's when it hit me. She thought she could steamroll me into compliance because of her position, because of the fear she could instill in the community. The tension built steadily over the next few days. I noticed neighbors avoiding my driveway, whispering as I walked past. I received cryptic texts from some residents, warning me to tread carefully. Meanwhile, the HOA president doubled down. She organized a small board visit under the guise of inspecting community compliance, claiming it was routine. She wanted me rattled, and judging by the stiff lines on my neighbors' faces, she was getting what she wanted. But I stayed calm. I watched. I documented. Every action, every word, every misplaced sense of authority would come into play soon. Then came the first real power play. She filed a formal complaint with the county about my vehicle. The notice was aggressive, citing unspecified violations of the community's electric vehicle rules. I read it twice, 3 times. It was vague but intimidating, exactly the point. My legal mind started ticking, cataloging every discrepancy, every contradiction between their claims and my actual ownership. Every misstep they made would eventually become leverage. I wasn't worried yet. I was strategizing. That night, I spread every document I had across my kitchen table, marking dates, cross-referencing property maps, checking deed lines. My Tesla had been returned, but the tension hadn't lifted. In fact, it was intensifying. The HOA thought they had the upper hand, pushing fines, issuing threats, implying that I had no recourse. But I was mapping their mistakes, predicting their next moves. I realized then, escalation isn't about reacting emotionally. It's about calculating, letting them wear themselves down with overconfidence while you quietly build your case. The pressure reached its peak the next morning. A meeting notice slipped under my door, larger than ever, declaring a final decision about my Tesla and continued noncompliance. The HOA president's tone was audacious. They had assumed I was cornered. Everyone in the neighborhood had assumed I would back down. But the truth was, the more they tried to trap me, the more ready I became. I had patience. I had facts. And I had the quiet satisfaction of knowing that one wrong step from them could reverse the entire game. By the end of that day, I wasn't panicked. I wasn't angry. I was methodical. And little did she know, her smug confidence was about to become the biggest mistake she would ever make. The moment of truth came sooner than I expected. After days of carefully documenting every notice, every interaction, and every attempted intimidation tactic, I finally confronted the HOA president with hard evidence. I scheduled a meeting, not because they asked, but because I wanted to control the narrative. I brought my deed, parcel maps, and a printed copy of the bylaws. Every single clause they had thrown at me for weeks was neatly countered by legal facts, boundary lines, and ownership records. I wasn't angry. I wasn't aggressive. I was precise, calm, and completely unshakable. When I entered the meeting room, the air already felt heavy. The HOA president and 2 board members were seated at a long table, smug smiles on their faces, fully expecting me to fold under pressure. I set my papers on the table, tapped each section with a finger, and started methodically going through the violations they had cited. Every claim was either irrelevant, misapplied, or legally impossible. Your bylaws, I explained calmly, do not extend to my property. I am not a member of the HOA. Therefore, none of these rules apply. For a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that makes people fidget, lean forward, or avoid eye contact. I watched her face carefully, noticing her confidence start to crumble. She opened her mouth, trying to assert her authority, but I had anticipated this. I let her words hang midair, then pointed to the official parcel map, which clearly outlined my property lines. Every attempt she made to argue was immediately countered by irrefutable facts. Her smug tone began to falter, replaced by confusion, then shock. By the time I finished, she had frozen. Literally frozen. One hand hovered above the table as if she couldn't decide whether to grab a pen or retreat. Her eyes darted between the documents and me, realizing for the first time that all her threats, fines, and intimidation tactics had been baseless. The board members exchanged awkward glances, some trying to mask relief, others unable to hide their astonishment. I leaned back, calm and collected, watching as the power dynamic flipped entirely. The room that had once been hers to command was now mine to navigate. It wasn't just about winning, it was about exposing the overreach. Her authority, which she had wielded like a weapon, evaporated in the face of facts. I could see the fear and frustration building. Her plans to scare me into submission had failed spectacularly. This wasn't revenge in the dramatic sense. This was a legal, methodical dismantling of every attempt she had made to control me. Each document, every line of evidence, had acted like a mirror, reflecting her mistakes back at her in the clearest possible way. By the end of the meeting, the HOA president had no words left. She slumped slightly, a defeated posture replacing her usual rigid confidence. I gathered my documents, thanked them for their time, and walked out with my Tesla safely in the driveway, untouched and undamaged. Outside, I took a moment to breathe, letting the calm wash over me. The law had spoken louder than threats ever could, and the victory wasn't just about my car. It was about the principle of ownership, fairness, and standing your ground against overreach. What she hadn't realized in her obsession to control me was that confidence without knowledge is a liability. And that mistake, as I watched her fumble in disbelief, would echo far beyond that day. The HOA president had thought she was untouchable. She was wrong. Dead wrong. And the lesson was clear. When authority is abused, preparation and facts can flip the entire game in your favor. The fallout after that meeting was almost immediate and absolutely satisfying. Word traveled quickly through the neighborhood that the HOA president had overstepped her bounds and been corrected with irrefutable evidence. Whispers turned into conversations, and by the next morning, neighbors were cautiously congratulating me while still keeping an eye on the driveway. Some nodded in quiet approval. Others, still loyal to the HOA hierarchy, avoided eye contact entirely. I didn't mind. The point was made, and the ripple effects were already setting in motion. The very next day, the notices stopped. The threats vanished. The daily fines evaporated like smoke in the wind. My Tesla remained untouched in its spot, charging peacefully, almost defiantly, as if it understood that it had survived a full-scale bureaucratic assault. I drove through the neighborhood with a quiet sense of victory, not a gloating, aggressive feeling, but a calm, methodical satisfaction. The HOA president, who had once strutted around with authority dripping from every word, now kept her distance. She avoided any direct contact, meetings, or even passing comments. I could see her frustration each time our paths crossed, the rigid posture of control replaced by a stiff, awkward shuffling. That victory didn't end at the car. It extended to every interaction, every small battle that had built up over weeks. Emails demanding compliance went unanswered, fines were nullified before they could even be issued, and the constant anxiety of potential harassment disappeared. The neighborhood had a new understanding. Power isn't determined by title or position. It's determined by knowledge, preparation, and the courage to stand your ground. My Tesla was more than a vehicle now. It had become a symbol of that principle. As calm returned to my property, I reflected on the entire ordeal. There was a strange clarity in knowing that I had navigated a tense, high-pressure situation without losing composure or breaking any rules. The HOA president had assumed she could intimidate me into obedience, relying on fear and her perceived authority. Instead, her miscalculation had exposed every flaw in her approach. She had underestimated preparation, patience, and the sheer weight of documented facts. Every attempt she made to escalate was turned back on itself, leaving her powerless in the face of reality. By the end of that week, my driveway and my life felt genuinely peaceful again. The HOA president had retreated into the background, her attempts at control neutralized. My Tesla sat charging quietly, a silent reminder that arrogance paired with ignorance can crumble quickly when faced with the right strategy. And while the neighborhood continued its daily routines, one thing was certain. I had won, legally and definitively, without ever raising my voice or breaking a single law. Confidence, preparation, and the right facts had done all the heavy lifting. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about establishing boundaries, proving authority when it mattered, and letting actions speak louder than threats ever could. The HOA president had learned a lesson she wouldn't forget. Trying to control what isn't yours to control is a fast track to public humiliation and legal defeat. And as I watched my Tesla gleam in the driveway under the afternoon sun, I knew this was more than just a victory. It was a permanent reminder that patience, knowledge, and calm strategy will always outmatch arrogance and false authority.